Thank you very much indeed, and good morning to you all. Very nice to be here. I hope you enjoyed Sir John Jones's introductory keynote. Can you imagine sat there thinking, how am I going to follow this? But then, just stuck in my mind was his story of the lion. That's all I can think about now. 30 times a day? Obviously not British, but anyway, lovely to be here. I am going to talk about how to transform research into practice. For me, the most important question we should ask ourselves in an event like this is, so what? From any presentation, so what? So what can we do with this? I would like to give you some food for thought, and I will keep stopping to give you time to talk with each other. I think that's an important part of this as well, so that you can think about, okay, so what can we do with this? I notice most of you are sat in the middle of two people, so will you take a look to your left, take a look to your right, decide which of those looks most intelligent. You need to pick the clever one to talk with. Is there anybody who is thinking, I sat in the wrong place this morning? Or maybe you just need a mirror for some intelligence. Let me ask you this question, if I may. Which of those two paths would you take? And the reason I ask you this question is many, many years ago, back in 1999, I came across the work of a little-known professor called John Hattie. He's a bit better known these days, but back then nobody had heard of him outside of his own family. I tend to work with John quite often, particularly in Scandinavia, and we go on a tour together. I took this photograph recently on that tour, and he asked me to take a photograph of him stood next to this sign. He thought the sign was a very good one, and ladies and gentlemen, this is the warm-up for the morning. Take a look at this sign. Pick your victim. Lick your lips. When you look at that sign, it makes me think that maybe the Danes don't have the same sex life as a lion either. But what John Hattie has done is he's collected together thousands of studies and compared them one against the other to say what makes the difference. What makes a significant difference? Because, to be honest, there's pretty much anything we do, as Sir John was telling us this morning, pretty much anything we do, so long as we do it with heart and mind, so long as we give time and passion and energy, is going to work. But what John Hattie looks at is, well, some things work better than others. And he presents a graph, and Kristin, I'm sure, will talk more about this, so I'm not going to go into depth here. But I am going to give you a very quick overview, because this is my starting point. What John Hattie has found is there are few things in the red area. They have a negative effect on student learning. There are many things in that sort of yellowy-green area that have a positive effect, but less than average. And then there are things way over in the blue area that have a really significantly positive effect. But why this paper in 1999 jumped out at me was, as I was reading through it, there was something that simply stopped me in my tracks. And that is when we give students choice, when we give them control over their learning, when we say, you can choose, do you want to go for this or that? How would you like to do your learning today? Who would you like to work with? How would you like to present your ideas? And later on, we ask them, which subjects would you like to study? When we give them that choice, the effect is so small that actually it slows their learning down. Give them choice and they learn less. Now, when I saw that, I thought, what a load of rubbish. The hell does this Hattie guy know anyway with his funny name? He's never been into my classes. My students love choice, and when I give them choice, there's a sense of ownership. But then I thought, maybe that's a defensive position to take. Maybe I should ask, why? And why is it that so often, when we give them choice, they pick the easier path? Why? I'm going to give you a minute and a half to talk with the most intelligent person you can find, to come up with your theory. Please don't respond the same way I did, and I just said, well, that's rubbish. It's not true. Start from the premise, this is true, so why? 1.5 minutes talking with each other. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. If I could pause you there, please. Thank you. So, why then? I have to tell you, it was very, very tempting to leave you to talk for a whole hour and then say, thank you, that's my presentation done. Maybe I should say a few more things. About half of my working life is spent in Scandinavia. And there they talk about curling parents. You know, the Winter Olympic sport of curling, and you fling the rock and you sweep the ice to make it smoother. And there seems to be a lot of curling parenting going on, maybe much more now than there used to be. I dare say most of us in this room were like me. As a child, we just played outside. And you came back if it was dark or if you were hungry, and that was it. And now children are expected to text every 5 minutes. Yes, I'm still alive. Yes, I'm just out in the garden. Yes, I'm still fine. Thank you. And parents are always looking over their children all the time. And when children are arguing, what do parents do? Go and solve it, rather than just let them work it out themselves. But we're not talking about society. We're talking actually about education. And yes, there's curling parenting going on, but how much curling teaching is happening? How many of us smooth the way for our students? When we see them stuck, when we see them having problems, how many of us swoop in with our cape to rescue them, to save them from confusion? How many of us plan lessons to think, how am I going to get them from here to there as effectively and efficiently as possible? How do I do it? If I asked your students, which of these two scores, 6 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, which of those two are you most likely to be praised for? and told, very good, well done. Which one? 10 out of 10. Which path are you most likely to get 10 out of 10 on? So when we give them choice, what are they thinking? Let me do the thing I know I can do. How do you respond when students are confused or make mistakes? How many of us go over to the students and sit down and quietly, privately help them to correct that mistake? If you change this, do that, it'd be better. Okay, you got it? Great, well done. Compared to how many of us say, that's a brilliant mistake, can I just share it with everyone? Everyone, just stop what you're doing. Look at this wonderful mistake. Now, what can we learn from it? You know, some people have told me that's almost illegal to do that. But what does the first situation tell students? What does it say about mistakes? They're a bad thing. But it's all right, I'm a good person. I take care of you, and I will protect you. I won't tell anybody. I'll help you to edit them. My 3 children, we went on a bike ride. My youngest, she's just 3, she sat on the back of my bike, and she never stopped talking the whole flipping journey. My 11-year-old got on her bike, and off she went. My 7-year-old, he's just got a new bike for his birthday, and you know what you do? You buy a bike that's too big for them so that it lasts longer. So my son gets on his bike that's too big, and he's wobbling on this bike. And as he's wobbling, he's just about that far off falling off the whole time. But he keeps going. And I'm saying, you're doing great. Keep going. You'll get there. Out of those 3 children, which one was learning most about bike riding? What would you have thought of me as a parent if I had said, Harry, I think you're wobbling a bit too much. Why don't you get off your bike and just push it along? Or shall I get your older sister to run alongside and hold it for you? That'll help. You'd think there goes one of those curling parents the Scandinavians talk about. However, I cringe to think how often, as a teacher, I've done exactly that. When students are wobbling, when students are finding it a challenge, when they're out of their comfort zone and they're wobbling along, how many of us go and help them and stop them from wobbling? And think about praise. Who gets the most praise in classrooms? A lot of classrooms, it's the kids who go. So what's that teaching them? Here, you've got to prove what you can do. Just do it. And then the teachers will be very impressed. Think about driving. Driving in your home city. How many of you are able to drive from home to work almost on autopilot? You're just minding your own business, and then you get there and you think, how the hell did I get here? Come on, raise your hands if you're able to do that. No wonder this country's got a reputation for driving. Here's the thing. Let's say you see me walking along the street, so you offer me a lift. Oh, thanks very much. And as we're driving along, as you are driving in your home city, what would you think if I said to you, you're such a good driver. Thank you ever so much. You're doing brilliantly. You are great at driving. Well done. How many of you would be thinking, you patronizing Englishman? Come on, raise your hands in the air. So why do we do it to the kids? Why do we praise them when they're in their comfort zone? When they're doing something easily, why do we say, very good, well done, you're so good at this? Why is that not patronizing for them? Tell you what, try driving in another city. Maybe, I tell you what, why don't you try driving in London? According to you, they drive on the wrong side of the road. It's obviously the correct side, but let's say it's the wrong side for you. And let's say you're driving in London and you give me a lift. How many of you would feel that you deserved a bit of encouragement and praise? You're doing really well. Open your eyes, that'll be even better. You're doing great, well done. You'd think, too right, well done me, wouldn't you? And how much would you learn? 10 journeys in your own home city, in your comfort zone, or 1 journey in London? Which one would you learn most from? So when we are giving our students choice, what's going through their mind? What are they thinking? Round here, the adults tell us very good, well done when we get it right. And when we don't get it right, they say, try harder. So, here is my recommendation to you. Please, 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 do not describe that path on the right as difficult. Far too often, when we say to our students, I'm going to challenge you, too many of them hear, I'm going to make things difficult for you. And they're thinking, no thank you. But let me ask you this. How many of you are hoping that this school year will be much more difficult for you than last school year? Raise your hands in the air. Good. We've all got our sanity just about intact. You see, if we think that path on the right is difficult, who wants to go anywhere near it? That's not attractive, is it? So, my recommendation to you is this. Please convince everybody, yourself included. Convince everybody in your school, in your classrooms, that easy is boring, challenging is interesting. If I said which of those 2 paths looks more difficult, they pick the one on the right. If I say which one looks more interesting, they pick the one on the right. But notice the difference in attitude. We need to describe that one on the right as the adventure playground. The place that we have fun, we explore, we find out things, we find out about ourselves. So, how does that play itself out in the classroom? When you see students doing something that for them is easy, it's their easy path, what we ought to say is, wow, you're finding this really easy, let's make it more interesting. Shall we try it again? This is mind training. Some people might call it brainwashing. I don't care what we call it. But it's just got to trip off the tongue. Wow, you're finding this really easy. Let's make it more interesting. And then you make it more difficult. But don't call it that. Want to make it more interesting. And when those students are, like my son, wobbling and not giving up, and that's the thing, it's not a case of wobble and stop, it's wobble and not give up, those are the ones who ought to hear us saying, well done, you're doing great, keep going, you will get there. It's as simple and as complex as that. It's taking it and switching it. Instead of looking to rush to their aid to help them, it's a case of looking for opportunities to challenge them, to encourage them onto that path on the right. I know some of you might be thinking, oh yeah, have you seen the students I have to teach them? They don't want to go anywhere near there, and if they get it wrong, their parents get annoyed. It used to be, if we got it wrong, it was our fault when we were kids. Now, if the kids get it wrong, it's the teacher's fault. One of the phrases I hate more than anything else is, what can I do? I'm just a teacher. As Sir John reminded us this morning, there's no such thing as just a teacher. we have an enormous effect. We set the culture. Please never ever forget, you set the culture. Some of you think, I didn't realize you'd taken that photograph of me. If you are dubious, if you think that's not true, think back to your secondary school days. We all went from one teacher to another, to another, to another, didn't we? We had a different teacher for language than we did for science, than we did for history. Is there anybody in this room who did not know which teachers had very high expectations for you? And which ones maybe didn't even know your name? Which ones had a good sense of humor, and which ones you suspected had not laughed since childhood? Is there anybody who did not know which was which? Could you raise your hands, please, if you changed your behavior, you changed your expectations, you changed your motivation according to which teacher you were with for that particular lesson? Of course we did. You set the culture. I hated secondary school, absolutely hated it. Best day of my school life was the day I left. I was forever in trouble for one reason or another, and I'd be sent to see the principal. And again and again and again, I'd be sat outside the principal's office waiting for yet another punishment. And whenever teachers walked past me, typically they'd go, and I'd be like that behind their backs. But there was one teacher who would always stop and say, "Why are you here again? I can't believe it. You never mess about in my class. You always are interested in my class." Now, this was in the 80s, and you didn't answer back in the 80s, but if I was allowed to, I would have said, well, that's because it's you. You like questions. You engage us. You challenge us. We do wonderful experiments. And let's be clear, he taught chemistry. The worst flipping subject in the world. I mean, seriously. I studied chemistry until I was 18, and my first job was in the chemical industry. I'd rather stab myself in the leg 20 times than do that again. But I kept going because it was him, because he made it interesting, because he challenged us, because there was no such thing as the clever kids and the stupid ones. It was we investigate, we explore, we learn. There are no stupid questions. I saw a brilliant tweet last week, and that was, do not ask what teachers do. Instead, ask their students, what do your teachers value? What would they say? What do they think we value? Do they think we value, get it right, get the job done, finish it, well done? Or do we value exploration, getting out of our comfort zone, questions, wondering, working together, thinking together? What do we value? A minute and a half talking with each other, so what? So what can we do? To emphasize the things that we do brilliantly, that work well, and to change anything we think we might need to change. So what? Minute and a half talking with each other. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If I can pause you there, please. Thank you. So, do you remember, you'll have seen adverts where they've got those time-lapse cameras, and the cameras are recording people coming out of a subway station. There are the escalators and there are the stairs, and almost everybody takes the escalators because you look for the easier option. What did they do? They simply made the stairs more interesting. When I first started this job, it involves a lot of travel, and when I fly around Europe, it's normally 2 short, fairly short flights. So I get on the first flight, I sit down, they come along with the free booze, and it's against the law in the UK to say no to that, so you take your booze, you drink that, you get off the aeroplane, and then you stand on a travelator, and the travelator takes you all the way to the next gate, and then you sit down and you have more free booze. Turns out it wasn't very good for my health. So I got one of those fitness band things. How many of you have ever taken to wearing one of those things? Fitness band. The moment it goes on your wrist, there's a flick in your mind. You stop thinking, there's the easy way, and you start looking for, oh, there's an opportunity to get my steps up. I'll just walk around here. When I get off the aeroplane now, I never go on the travelators. I always walk alongside, feeling very superior, looking down my nose. That's all this is. This is not changing everything we do. It's flicking that switch. So in our classrooms, in our schools, what are we doing? We're looking around to look for opportunities for more of that exercise. But that exercise is mental exercise, learning exercise, looking around for opportunities to swoop in and challenge them more, rather than swoop in and help them. Looking for opportunities to praise and encourage those who are continuing to wobble and not giving up. They're sticking at it. Talk about resilience, determination. If I take you back to those 2 paths, which one do you learn most from? Which one do you have to think about more as you go along it? Which one do you need to engage with others about more? Which ones are you going to develop such things as resilience, determination, thinking skills? Which one will you remember months from now? And there's the thing, a lot of people say, yeah, I get it, but you know, we don't have time. We've got too much to cover. I learned yesterday that you have 2 curriculum, that the kids have 8 hours of lessons every day. Just you wait till I get back to Europe and say, you think you've got it challenging. Try teaching in Argentina. 8 hours? 8.5. Blinking heck. The thing is, if you spend 8.5 hours in your comfort zone, or just one out of your comfort zone, which one will you learn most from? So how are we going to make it so that one on the right is more attractive, more alluring? Because I've started with student choice. I gave you a story about my 3 kids. That's easy with 3 kids. When I'm teaching, I've got 33 kids. How on earth are you supposed to challenge them all? And that's why it's not about you dragging them onto that path. It's about changing the culture in the classroom so that's the cool path. That's the one they want to be on. That's the one they say, this is too easy, can I try that one instead? On that bike ride, how could I have got my eldest to have learned more? What could we have done? That was one of those direct questions where I was hoping for an answer. Okay, exactly. Yeah, that's a much better answer. Change the path. Much better than the one I got in Scotland 3 months ago, and that was slash the tyres. But if you get weather like they do in Scotland, no wonder they're miserable all the time. But the thing is, you could slash the tyres, but wouldn't it be better for my daughter, for all 33 of my students to say, this is too easy, can we go off-road and we'll see you at the other end? How can we do that? I know I met a number of you, a number of the organising committee in Bilbao about 2 years ago. It was a thinking conference. And about 5 years before that, there was another in the series of the thinking conference, and it was Kuala Lumpur. And one of the speakers at that conference was Howard Gardner, the guy who created the idea of multiple intelligence. You know, this idea that IQ is too limited, so we ought to think about intelligence in terms of visual, spatial, mathematical, linguistic, interpersonal. Here's how he began his presentation. I wish teachers had never heard my ideas about multiple intelligence. I thought, ooh, that's an interesting start. 2,000 teachers in the audience. I wish teachers had never heard my ideas about multiple intelligence because teachers are obsessed with categorizing kids. I thought, ooh, somebody got out of bed the wrong way this morning. But a few months after that conference, I was in a school and I saw some 14-year-olds doing maths, and there was a boy at the back of the class flailing his arms around like this. I thought, poor lad, he's having a fit. But he kept going, so I thought, maybe he's not having a fit. So I walked up to him and said, excuse me, young man, what are you doing? And he said, oh, I'm a kinesthetic learner. I have to move to learn. And I'm thinking, who the hell has taught him that utter load of poppycock? You have to move to learn? It might sound hip, trendy, and down with the kids to say that sort of rubbish. But that poor child then has to go to another teacher who, let's just say, is a bit more traditional and expects students to sit still. That boy is now in the class thinking, this teacher won't let me move, and if I can't move, I can't learn, so I may as well go. In other words, we stopped them stopped them learning. I then saw some 8-year-olds. The following day, again, they were doing maths, and they'd all been grouped into different groups, and there was one group over here. They all had earphones in, and they're going boom, diddy, boom, diddy, whilst they're doing the maths. Then this lot were going multiply, add, question mark, equal. And then this lot were counting with leaves and twigs and berries. I'm thinking, this is a hippie school if ever I've come across one. I said, excuse me, what's going on? Oh, we're a multiple intelligence school. And they're the musically intelligent, and these are the body smart kids. And then honestly, she said, and these are the naturists. Now, that means you take off all your clothes. I think she meant naturalists, but you know, what's clothes between friends? Talking to a group of boys in the corner of a classroom, I said, what's wrong with you? They said, oh, we've been given extra maths. I said, oh dear, that doesn't sound good. They said, no, we hate maths. I said, why do you hate maths? And one of them said, well, I've got a stupid dad. The teacher was over here, said, oh yeah, his dad is like, wah. That boy is at home saying, Dad, will you help me with my homework? And Dad says, I was never any good at maths. Go and ask your mother. And that boy's walking away thinking, aha, there's a genetic reason why I can't do maths. Sounds lovely. Oh, you're the musical one, and you're the mathematical one. It sounds lovely until you ask the musical one to do maths. Ask the mathematical one to do music. And they say, I haven't got a musical bone in my body. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. I heard a group of schools recently at a conference talking about how they get their students to work in their preferred learning style. I'm like, ah. Is that like Capricorns over here, Aquarians here, and if you're a Taurian, go over there? If there was such a thing as a preferred learning style, if there was, why the hell would you get them working in their preferred learning style? Why not anything except your preferred learning style? Because I thought we wanted to make it interesting, out of our comfort zone. Our classrooms ought to be the safest places in the world to be out of our comfort zone. That's where it ought to be. Go and show off elsewhere if you want. But in here, we get out of our comfort zone. In here, we learn together, we investigate, we challenge, we question, we wonder, because this is the safest place to do it, is when we are out of our comfort zone together. Please excuse the very cheesy photo. This was me a few years ago in a school in Auckland, and I was walking around the school. They were doing lots of interesting things. I walked up to these boys and I said, "What are you doing?" They said, "Breakthrough." I said, "Oh, that sounds interesting. What's that?" They said, "That's where you have to pick something really, really hard. And you have to keep working at it, till eventually you have a breakthrough." I said, "Whoa, so what are you doing on the laptops?" They said, "CGI animation." I said, "Wow, do you know a lot about CGI animation?" They say, "We know nothing about it. Well, that's why we picked it." That school, the staff there are switched on. Because what they're doing is they're saying, evidence, research tells us, when we give students choice, too many of them pick the easy option. Our own experience tells us kids love choice. So how are we going to keep those two satisfied? And what did they do? They give students lots of choice, but they make sure there's no easy option. You go for challenging, really challenging, super challenging, or uber challenging. How many of you have got students who hate to be wrong? Raise your hands in the air if you think, I've got... Here's the thing. Don't get them out of their comfort zone yet. Go way beyond it. Go way beyond their comfort zone to the breakthrough. That might sound counterintuitive, but bear with me. If I said at lunchtime we're going to have a competition to see how many of you can chip a golf ball into a cup and you have to be 30 meters back. Now, those of you who play golf will probably start sweating right now, think I've got to be able to do this, and you'll just be quietly warming up. No, I'm not. No, this is how I stand normally. Because you think, I've got to be able to do it, and if I can't, my friends will make fun of me and say, you're not so good at golf after all. Because for you, it's out of your comfort zone, but it's only just. How many of you, though, who have never played golf in your life, would just be happy if you could hit the ball? You don't care where it goes, so long as it goes somewhere. Come on, how many of you think, come on, may as well have a go. What have I got to lose? And that's a breakthrough. You've got nothing to lose. You don't expect to succeed. You'd just be thrilled if you hit it. And if it goes bing, 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 and into the cup, that's a breakthrough. Well, come on, that's a miracle, but that's what they're talking about. If you are on Twitter, follow Stonefields School, at Stonefields, SCH, and they post images of their breakthrough activities. And here's how they started. If you work with 8-year-olds, give them things that you think 11-year-olds would find challenging. If you work with 10-year-olds, give them something that 13-year-olds would find challenging. In other words, it's whatever the age of your students, add 3 years. Now, it's much more nuanced these days, but that's how they started. Taking them so far out of their comfort zone, they've got nothing to lose. How many of you put students into groups, and after a few minutes, 1 or 2 of them come up to you and say, do I have to work with them? I could do better by myself. And that's very often true, because we give them activities that are too easy. if we're going to put our students into groups, let's get them so far out of their comfort zone that the only possible chance of success is if they pool all their ideas, all their resources, all their talents. Let's make challenge the exciting thing. Let's bring them back to their early childhood, because let's face it, if you offered a young kindergarten child, which of those two paths do you want to take? Almost all of them are up the challenging path before you've even finished the sentence. So how are we going to get them back to that attitude? How are we going to bring them back to, let's go for the adventure playground? Come to school, come to lessons, and we'll go on adventures together. 2 minutes, talking with each other. So what? What can we do? Five, four, three, two, one. Let me pause you there, please. Thank you. So, here's the thing. While I was listening to Sir John Jones this morning, and he talked about robots, and he talked about robots replacing us, I disagree. Partly. I think robots can replace and are already replacing some of what we do. I find the solo taxonomy to be a really useful, what shall we say, interpretation of learning. If you don't use the solo taxonomy, I absolutely recommend it to you. Investigate it, find out about it. Because it's a really great tool for your students and you to think about progress in learning. The solo taxonomy begins with no idea about the subject, about the topic. Then you move to where you've got one or two ideas. It then moves to where you've got lots of ideas. Those are the first 3 light bulbs you see there. Here's the thing. If you want to learn to play the guitar, you could find a local teacher, or you can go online and let Sting teach you. You can use Khan Academy with the thousands of videos out there. You can use little companies such as Google, and they can do this for your students. This is what, those first three are what many researchers call surface level learning. Some people call it superficial. I prefer not to use the term superficial because there's a bit of a value judgment in that. But surface, you've got to go on the surface before you can go deep. The next two are where we can go deep. Notice the fourth icon down, the relational. See the third one, each light bulb has got a separate cord. The next one, the cords are intertwined, because that's at the heart of understanding, is how do these things link to each other? How do they influence each other? How are they influenced by each other? And that's at the heart of understanding, going from knowledge, surface, to understanding. And then taking that understanding and applying it in another context, in an abstract way. And I would agree that the robots that Google, that online, that Khan Academy can replace learning at surface level. But what you and I should never be replaced with, and I don't believe will be able to be replaced with, is helping our students to make those local connections, to understand how all these things connect with each other. I was massively influenced by Matthew Lipman, the guy who created Philosophy for Children. His books, I read and read and read them when I was training to be a teacher. And he talked about, if you imagine every subject as a brick in the wall. So we've got maths, we've got science, we've got language, we've got history. They're all different bricks. He said, when do we give them chance to put the mortar in between, to make the links? And the way we organise, particularly our secondary schools, it becomes even worse, because we're all in those little bubbles, in those little silos. But that's where deep learning happens, when we are making those connections, when students are saying, so what we were doing here, does that mean that that happens, and then does this affect this? And yet, how often have we said to students, now you remember studying Venn diagrams in maths, don't you? And they go, no. That wasn't us, that was another class. No, I know that you did it just 2 months ago. No. Because so much learning stays within the context in which it was learned. What do we need to do? How can we create the opportunity to cause them to make links? That's those last two. So, how do we create time for that? Well, how many of you remember the Kodak camera? Come on, most of you are old enough to remember. You're really showing your age now. Young people are looking around thinking, what are these dinosaurs talking about? The Kodak camera. The ubiquitous, everybody knew about Kodak cameras and all the film, and you sent your film away, and 2 weeks later, you get somebody else's holiday photographs back with a finger over the lens. Actually, I'm going to be talking about feedback later on, and I do think that's part of why we as a group, as a human beings, we've become much, much better at photography, because we get instant feedback. The moment you take it, you think, oh, hell, that didn't work, and you do it again, and you add it, and we don't have to wait 2 weeks to see that we've stuffed up and got it all wrong. But here's the thing, here's why I'm talking about Kodak. Does anybody know what happened in 2012? They went bust. The number one camera company in the world went bust. Why? They actually created the very first digital photograph. But here's what they said. They looked at it and said, that's amazing, but we are the world's best at 35mm film. Talk about a big mistake. That is interesting, but what we do brilliantly is this. How many of us are in danger of being the Kodak teachers? Yes, Google and Khan Academy, they do things brilliantly, but I'm world class. I am brilliant at giving information to my students. I can help them move from knowing nothing to knowing lots, because I'm brilliant at it. I've got 30 years experience of that. Are we going to become the Kodak teachers? Because where we are most effective is in those latter two. Connections, questions, engaging, adventures. I would absolutely recommend to you, you look at preview. Preview is where you get your students to make progress in those first three before they even begin the lesson. Next week, we're going to study all about the water cycle. So your homework is be ready for that. Go and find out as much as you can about the water cycle, and I'll see you next week. And most of them have moved, so you can pick them up at a later stage of development. Think about the subjects you hated. I hated French at school. I'd love to be able to speak the language, but a lot of my friends would go to France in the holidays. I never got to go. So during lessons, they were prepared to speak French. I wouldn't. When they spoke French, they got lots of lovely feedback and they improved. I said nothing. So I got no feedback and I didn't improve. Imagine if the teachers had said, next week, we're going to be using language to do with eating and drinking. So your homework is go and find a few phrases. Now, my friends could have gone and got their very advanced stuff. I could have gone and learned un café, un croissant, s'il vous plaît, and come back, and at least I would have something to begin with. I would have been further on in that. And we didn't have Google back then. Imagine how much they could learn now. If you teach students for 3 lessons a week, don't think about it as 3 lessons in 1 week. Think about it as 2.5 plus a half. The last half starts next week's work. So they've got time to think about it. Some people actually say, doesn't that spoil the surprise? And I think if surprise is the main part of your pedagogy, you might want to expand it just a little bit. It's not about giving away all your state secrets, it's about giving them the opportunity to move through the stuff that the robots can help with so that we can then do the brilliant stuff, the connections, the challenges. That's why I created the idea of the learning challenge or the learning pit, because I wanted to start from what they knew and then take them down into the pit to get them really thinking about and wondering and asking questions and wobbling. And I'll talk about that tomorrow. And then they come out of the pit, and that sense of achievement is brilliant. To finish, I would like to pass over to a 6-year-old. This is a 6-year-old in a school that I've been working with, and I talked all about the pit. And we've got the students using the pit to get them out of their comfort zone, to learn lots more. Her 9-year-old brother, when he was asked, how should you behave? He said, don't point guns at each other, don't wave a knife in somebody's face, and definitely do not strangle your sister. As you can imagine, the social services are taking a bit of an interest in that family. 6-year-old Grace wrote and performed this song all about learning in the pit. And teachers suspect that she wrote it to escape the realities of her life. And I would like to pass over to Grace. It's just 1 minute, just to finish.
Listen, class, we're going to try and get out of the pit today because my song is actually like the pit. It's called Stuck in the Pit. Once there was a girl called Pearl. The teacher got a piece of work that Pearl thought was easy. Then she fell
If only I knew to play the guitar, you just need one chord. I would have tried it myself. But that last bit, you learn more from your mistakes. And just a very subtle nuance to finish. If my son had fallen off his bike, I would not have gone, "Hey, you fell off your bike, brilliant." This is not about celebrating mistakes. It's about recognizing them as we tend to make mistakes when we're out of our comfort zone. So let's take it as, right, so they're learning more. And if we treat them as an opportunity to learn from, then they're great. If we treat them as this is shameful or embarrassing or I shouldn't have done that, then it tells them to stay in their comfort zone. I hope you found that useful. I hope there's some answers to the question, so what? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.